Thank you very much and good morning. It's wonderful to see so many people here, and this is a fantastic project that we as an organisation have been driving now for the last 2 years. At the outset, I'd like to pay tribute to my colleagues at Roxby Media, David and his outstanding team, who have put together today's event and have put together an outstanding publication. From the organisation's perspective, you can only do so much with a publication by itself. Over the last 2 years, throughout the life of this publication, we've done a lot more with it. We've hosted networking events and business briefings right around Australia over the course of the last 12 months around this publication, and it really is an opportunity for our members to engage with colleagues and also to engage with Chinese companies and Chinese government agencies at the forefront of Australia's commercial relationship with China. So it really is a fantastic initiative. I'm also very pleased to advise that, again in partnership with Roxby Media, next week at the National Press Club we will also be launching a brand new quarterly publication, the Australia-China Quarterly, that will emerge as a major piece of thought leadership, published every 3 months, looking at the major trade and investment issues affecting Australia and China. So that is another terrific ACBC Roxby Media initiative. I'd also like to pay tribute to my colleague, Mr. Ouyang Cheng from the Chinese Embassy this morning, and also my friends from the Australian government here from the Australian Trade Commission. So thank you very much. I would just like to say a couple of things about this very special Australia-China bilateral relationship. I flew back yesterday morning from Shanghai, and I was at the 6th Australia-China bilateral dialogue on energy and resources cooperation hosted by the National Energy Administration of the People's Republic of China and the Department of Resources, Energy and Tourism. And can I just say that this event was testament to the broadening links across all levels of government and also industry in the Australia-China relationship. There are some very clear messages that I took out from that conference, and we've heard a lot of it in the media, but I think it's worth saying again here this morning. And one from the perspective of the Chinese government and also from Chinese industry is that while Australia is seen as such a spectacular place to do business, and we have an abundant supply of natural resources and commodities, we as a country simply must get our infrastructure priorities right. If we don't do that, then the bottlenecks will continue, and I begin to doubt the long-term sustainability of the resources boom. Indeed, Australian companies have much to learn from China's infrastructure development over the last 25 to 30 years. It really has been nothing short of spectacular. And one of the other observations that I've made travelling to China over the last 10 or 12 years, and in my current role as CEO of the Australia-China Business Council, which I find somewhat amusing, but at the same time one might also find it heartbreaking. One of the key messages I get from Chinese companies from time to time is that you in Australia, you really need to develop your infrastructure. We keep telling you and telling you and telling you, and still nothing gets done. And I say, oh yes, well, we've just created Infrastructure Australia, and there's a lot that we can do. And they say, no, I think it is more than that. I think it is part of a grand conspiracy between the Australian government and your resources companies to keep upward pressure on prices so that we can continue paying more for iron ore and coal. And I say to them, no, believe me. In Australia, we have a very, very difficult regulatory process and indeed complex stakeholder engagement across all levels of government, and we find infrastructure a very, very challenging issue indeed. So I just think it's a really fascinating perspective directly in market. The other thing that I would say is that we've all heard about the spectacular potential for further growth in services trade between Australia and China. And it is a very, very complex, a very challenging market on so many levels for Australian companies. And I think it's incumbent on organisations like the Australia-China Business Council and our colleagues in Austrade and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and indeed, if I may say so, also the Chinese government, it is incumbent on each and every one of us to get our companies China market ready. China accounts for 0.7% of our nation's total FDI output, yet China is our largest trading partner. There is a major imbalance in the trade and investment relationship that simply must be addressed if this is again going to be sustainable and if we are going to broaden our trade beyond resources, as important as that is to the fabric of our recent terms of trade boom. And so I think one of the reasons that we can attribute that to is that simply a lot of Australian companies, you know, we're not that China market ready. And when I look at what our friends in Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom, the EU, Canada and North America, when I see what they're doing and the levels of market readiness that exist in these economies is really quite astounding. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn. But there are incredible success stories that we see in our newspapers increasingly every single day of the week. And can I just say that the announcement this week by Alan Joyce in Hong Kong about the establishment of Jetstar Hong Kong and the partnership with China Eastern Airlines, it is one of the most significant transactions that I have seen in the history of the Australia-China trade and investment relationship. And it's significant for a number of reasons. One, to my knowledge, it is the first time a foreign airline has entered a joint venture with a state-owned Chinese carrier, or a Chinese carrier for that matter. Now, foreign airlines are effectively precluded from investing directly in market at the moment. It is off limits to foreign investment. However, if we've learnt anything over the last 32 years of China's opening up to the world, we've learnt this, is that China is prepared to use markets like Hong Kong as a testing ground for further investment when the NDRC and other Chinese government agencies open the door to further investment. And you can bet your house on it that this investment is the first move in broadening up China's civil aviation industry. And some of the growth figures in the investment pipeline in China in the aviation space is simply astounding. And for Australia to be ahead of Lufthansa, ahead of KLM, ahead of Air France and British Airways, indeed ahead of Cathay Pacific or Singapore Airlines, and establishing a joint venture in market on the ground in Greater China with a Chinese counterparty is just such a fantastic outcome for Australia, and I think it is going to do wonders for the future of our national carrier, as much as some in the debate would have you otherwise believe. Briefly, I'd also like to make some remarks about the Prime Minister's white paper on Australia in the Asian century. I think that this is one of the most significant initiatives to have come out of government. I hope that the government, as they do draft this 200-page report over the course of the next few months, I do hope that they put their money, I hope the government puts its money where its mouth is, because this is an opportunity for us as a country to get our policy settings right as we transform our engagement with the region and indeed China over the course of the next 20 to 30 years. For too long, our public policy settings in this country across a whole range of fronts are driven by 3-4-year term electoral cycles, and so it is really wonderful to see the government taking this head on, and I hope that there will be substantive public policy outcomes over the weeks and months ahead. We've made a wide-ranging submission to the Prime Minister's task force, and indeed one of its recommendations was accepted personally by the Prime Minister last week at our Canberra Networking Day in Parliament House, and that is something that we and others, I might add, have been advocating for a very, very long time, and that is the establishment of an Australian Consul General in an emerging market like Chengdu or Chongqing. Chongqing has a population of some 30 million people, depending on whose figures you believe, and by all accounts, it is the largest city in the world. Yet you go out there and you talk to your average Australian punter, and I would wager that most haven't even heard of a place like Chongqing. And so for the Australian government to get into a market like Chengdu and really, really ramp up our diplomatic footprint is such a fantastic outcome for Australia's long-term engagement with our largest trading partner. And yet, if you look at an economy like the UK, who trade $13 billion a year with China, and you look at us, and we trade $113 billion a year with China, the UK's diplomatic footprint and their resources in China is significantly ahead of our own. But that's for the fundamental reason that for better or for worse, rocks will always sell themselves. This, ladies and gentlemen, is about taking our relationship with China beyond tomorrow. Thank you very much.